Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a day in the life of an author. In fact, we're going to be talking about a day in the life of two authors. I'm your host, Craig Hanks, and with me, a returning guest, Veronica Roth. Welcome back, Veronica.
Thanks. Really good to be back.
Oh, you don't have me convinced, but we'll see how the episode
goes.
What?
I don't! Maybe I'm just a bad liar or bad truth teller.
Truth.
I am happy to be back.
I'm messing with okay. There are more jokes, but you know what? I'd rather just not dig for a further hole for myself. It's fine. No, Veronica, you came on a while ago, and we did Dark Lord of Dirkholm for an Author Shelf episode, and it was fantastic. And people should go back and listen to that. I don't know what episode number it was, so just search it and you'll find it. And it was lovely. It was a great conversation. But joining us also, a newcomer to the show, Amy Lukavics. Did I get it right?
You got it right.
Yes. Amy, welcome. Okay, now I'm going to say welcome, Amy, and I want you to really sell that you're happy to be here.
Oh my goodness, it is just such a pleasure, and
what an honor.
Honestly, what an honor.
Showing me up. Oh my gosh.
So you both are here to talk to me about a day in the life of a writer. And then at the end of the episode, we're going to talk about some projects that you guys have either coming out or like recently come out or coming out now, whatever. And so we're going to talk about Arch Conspirator for Veronica, and we're going to talk about Cold Water Veins for Amy. But that will all wait. So people can hear about your new projects in just a moment. First, a day in the life of a writer or an author. Let's go with an author. Yeah, that's because I'm a writer, but I write. I publish 800 words at a time. It's not quite the same thing. So let me first throw something your way, and then I'll have you both react to it. And it's the idea of a writer versus someone who has written. Okay. Now, here's what I mean. There are those who love writing. And my favorite kind of... I'll just go ahead and call them out. They're big enough names. They can handle it. Nobody's going to get mad at me. Brandon Sanderson loves writing. That guy cranks out books like nobody's business, right? He sits down every day and he just cranks out books. Patrick Rothfuss, not so much. But he loves having written. So there's a difference between loving to write and loving having written. And neither of them is necessarily wrong. Well, unless you're somebody, waiting for book 3 or whatever. But neither, honestly,
don't start that fight.
I'm not, I am on record as being much more sympathetic than your average Rothfuss fan toward that. But anyway, where do you both fall on this? Do you find pleasure in the act of writing, or is it more a pleasure of it's kind of torture to get a book out, but then once it's out, it's, oh man, this is so pleasurable? Does that make sense? Where do you both fall on that?
For me, it's more, I like writing. Sometimes you hit like a rough spot and you're like, oh God, this is like pulling teeth, really. But I think that's pretty normal. I think on average, I like the process a lot. And actually having written it doesn't bring with it any sense of, I don't know, any elevated sense of wonder or accomplishment for me. Just like, oh, okay, I guess now we're in the horrible gaping hole between projects, which doesn't actually, I don't enjoy it. So that's me.
So you do like writing. Okay.
Yeah.
Amy,
yeah.
what about you?
My answer is very similar to Veronica's. I honestly, sometimes writing a book is torture for me, just to make myself put my focus forth enough to get relevant amounts of it done. But definitely I'm in it for how I feel while I'm writing. It feels very selfish in that sense. I don't keep anyone in mind while I'm doing it. It's just similar to a puzzle. It's just a great way to be engaged with something in your head that's not shutting up. And I do really love the process. It's really nice. And honestly, feeling that way, I think, is really important when it comes to after the fact, when the book is out and reviews are coming in and everyone's giving their opinions. And it's luckily, emotionally, I'm already on to the next project,
Yeah.
because the one that they're discussing is what I did forever ago. So it's like, pff, whatever. I already did it. It was really fun. So I would have to agree with Veronica on that one.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. So, all right, that's just to kind of lay the groundwork of maybe where your mindsets are. But now let's talk about an actual day in the life. You wake up and immediately start writing, or what? So, it's tempting to say, if you're an author, if you're a writer, this is a job like any other, and you got to do your job. But it's not a job like any other. This isn't, or is it? Is it a kind of thing where you wake up and you're like, hey, I've got my 9 to 5, and from now until then, I'm writing, and then after that, whatever. How do you approach it? Kind of first thing in the morning, if you know you're working on a project and you've got something to do. What? How do you ease into that in your day?
Well, I can't wait for this contrast because I know Amy and I have very different lives. I do not have children. I do not have another job. So for me, I wake up and I'm like not fully online and like in my mind until about noon. I'm not a morning person. And like to the point where my spouse, like he's not allowed to talk to me about anything serious before 11 a.m. And 11 a.m. was a compromise. I was like, I wanted it to be 1, but he used to come in here and be like, I have plans for the day. And I'd be like, get out. But I can get started with writing. So I kind of like sit down with my caffeine in the morning. I just drink tea and I look at what I did the day before and I reread a bit of it, not too much, because then I get stuck rereading. And then, I'll kind of get started, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, because it's too early for that shit. But God, already I'm swearing. But yeah, I kind of just give it a shot, and it's been a journey the last few years trying to be a little kinder to myself about it. Like if I can't do it that day, I don't feel good. I'm not awake. I have no ideas. Like I kind of let it go for a little while. I'll go do something else.
What I actually want to dig into that a little bit, because and we're going to zoom out a little bit potentially. But when you say I give myself a break for a little bit, do you mean a few hours, or do you mean a few days or a few weeks? Because for me, if I'm if I if I allow myself a break, then that can spiral really quickly for me, to where I'm like, I get out of the habit entirely of whatever the thing is. In your case, it's writing. But so what do you mean by give myself a little break?
Usually what I mean is a couple hours. I'll try again later in the day, or
Hmm.
even just like an hour later.
Yeah.
Or I go for a walk. Like I find walks really help me visualize and also come up with ideas and stuff. But if I'm like in a phase of life where I'm extremely stressed and overwhelmed by other stuff and I can't write, unless I have a deadline, like I'm a little easier on myself than I used to be, because I'm just like, life is short, for real.
Yeah.
Totally.
Amy, what about you? How do you ease into writing for the day? And when? At what time? What time do you do it?
Well, this has been changed up a little bit since I started a new full-time job in November. So, luckily though, that job is based out of Frankfurt, Germany. So my work
Mm.
day with them ends between 2:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. my time. I log in at 6:30. And once I'm off, lately how I've been doing it is once I'm off, I relax, unwind, make sure the kids are settled, and then write when I can. For me though, it's not as much of trying to stick to the daily habit as like where my mindset is as far as the project goes. Like when I'm just starting something out, or even if I'm in the middle section that can sometimes feel a little draggy on like the writing scale, because it's not the most fun things, which tend to come for me towards the end of the project. But once I get to the point in the story that I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I sort of become a little obsessive, and I can't wait till the next free moment that I can sit down and get through this scene or that scene. It's thrilling for me to imagine writing the end. So before I had that job, I would do something similar as V, where I just sort of eased into it. And unless there was a deadline, I'd be easy on myself if it came to taking breaks. It's weird because sometimes I'll take a long ass break, like 2 weeks of nothing, of just thinking about it, which counts as working, by the way, I say. But then once I'm to the point where I'm like, okay, I'm in the groove, I'm ready, then it's like, it's time to get serious. It's go time.
Yeah, yeah. So when it sounds like I might know what your answer is going to be, Amy, but do you, when you sit down and actually do start writing, you're in a groove or something, do you have a goal in mind of, I want to write this many words, I want to write for this long, I'll stay up forever to hit this goal, or do you cut yourself off somewhere?
That really depends on like when I'm trying to have this thing turned into my agent. If there's a
Yeah.
date that I have in mind, I will schedule out like word counts and I'll assign word counts through the days. Um, I used to do like a chapter a day, which is roughly 2K for me. Uh, but if no deadline, more recently, I've been just more focused on I want to get through this part. I want to get through this scene. By the time I'm done today, I want this to have been put out there, and I kind of go
Mm.
that way.
Yeah. What about you, Veronica?
I'm similar. I can't ever set word count goals because what I do is I just like I'm really good at treading water until I get to the word count goal, as opposed to like the narrative goal.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm like, I'll just write this like super inflated scene that really doesn't need to be that long in order to just hit the goal. So I do like a scene goal or this piece or I want this conversation to be over or um, yeah, and like you, I think I kind of write like 2,000 words a day in general, like average. That's I
Do
don't
you
know.
end up with 2,000 words a day, or do you write a bunch more and then self edit and end up with 2,000 words?
Good
How does that go
question.
for you guys?
2000 baseline and then like whatever
Yeah.
happens afterward. Like her, I also will reread what I did the day before, but she mentioned it. It's totally a trap. You can get stuck doing that for quite a while and end up eating up a lot of your writing time by just rewriting or tweaking or whatever.
Mm.
So I
Yeah.
try to keep that to a minimal, but the 2000 thing, it's like, all right, I've done it. It's if it's not completely great, like that sounds like a problem for tomorrow to me.
Now, and do you, when you finish a scene, and you've got your, okay, you've reached your 2,000 word goal or whatever, not a goal, but you've gotten there, you finished the scene. Is it a problem for you tomorrow, or do you? How much? Let me rephrase this question. How much do you lean on your editors versus yourself? How far does the transcript have to go before you're like, okay, you know what, I'm ready to turn this over and have somebody take a look at it?
Oh my
Man,
gosh.
I don't lean on them at all. I
No.
pretend they're not there.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because I'm like, I should only be sending this when I have no idea what to do. Like I don't know how to
Okay.
fix it or I don't know what the problems are anymore. That's when I send it out. I like to be total like get it as fully formed as possible before I let anybody else get their hands on it. It's like,
Totally.
they shape it and that's fine. That's part of like what an editor's or an agent's or anybody are helping with your work. They shape it. That's what you want. But I am so I get so mad about the first round of critique. Like that sounds so like childish of me, but I really like when I receive editorial feedback, my first reaction is always like frustration. And then I'm like,
Defensiveness.
yeah, and then I'm like, get a grip and be an adult. And then I sit with it for like a little, like an hour, whatever. And then I'm like, okay, the only reason it made me mad is because it's correct. So
Mm.
I know, and I'm getting good notes because I find them annoying. Um, if I'm like, whatever, then they really aren't digging deep enough, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would agree
Well,
with
we're
that.
really
I
we're speaking of digging deep, Veronica. You're really,
I
we're
know.
putting
I
you on the
just
couch here.
I just know myself. Like I don't know what it's this feeling of being misunderstood. You're like, "Don't you see what I was trying to do?" It's this like maybe a little like inner child. I don't feel bad about it cuz I'm not like taking it out on anyone. I
Right.
don't yell at
Right.
anyone or get annoyed with anyone, cuz you
It's
get the
all
notes like,
internal.
"Yes, this is like the storm that lives inside my body."
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you, Amy? How do you deal with self-editing versus working with
Oh my
these
gosh.
people who help you out?
I uh with all due respect to the amazing editors I've worked with, I never would leave something I wasn't feeling good about. Like that's just me personally. Like I need to feel like I did my best. And I mean, I will know objectively speaking, work needs to be done. And that's the thing about it is it doesn't matter what you turn in. work will need to be done. So you might as well start off at a point where you've done everything you possibly can. Because if you were to let those little things pile up, like, oh, this is a potential problem, I'll just leave it for later, I'll just leave it for later, you are going to be pulling at your hair out when the time comes to address all of that. And it's like, I'd rather spend that time, the first round especially, like she mentioned, I'd rather spend that time focusing on bigger problems that I was not aware of until they were kindly shown to my face.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Amy, have you ever turned something in and you actually didn't get that many notes? I feel like I'm always chasing that
Um,
dream, but it never
yes,
happens.
yes, but in that case, I knew for a fact much more needed to be done, so I wasn't
Ah.
relieved. I was like unsettled, and I was like, "Oh
You're
no."
like, you think this is fine?
Yeah, like, and I know it's not. Like, you didn't mention this or this. Like, time to bring in the
Mhm.
beta reader.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so let me shift gears a little bit. This is actually kind of inspired by what you guys are saying in response to that. But in your opinion, is there a personality type that is naturally given to what you do as far as putting out long form fiction? Is there is it innate, or is it a learned skill that you are able to do this?
A
Hmm.
wildly varying combination of either or.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I've seen, I've met a range, and like honestly, there are people that whose personalities, I mean, just all across the board, really, as far as why you're in it, what you like most about it, how you feel about doing certain things. Like I know promo comes very easily and natural to some, and others are like, I would rather
Mm.
jump into a volcano. And I think as far as like the habit of putting out long form, not so much a personality trait as different characteristics that enable you to persevere through the frustration and the rejection and the second guessing and accepting that you're going to have to put a lot of time and effort into something for nothing until much later.
Hmm.
Yeah, Veronica, thoughts?
Um, like Amy, I've met so many different kinds of writers who accomplish the same goal in like wildly different ways.
Mm.
And love and hate very different parts of the process. So like people who love rough drafts, I'm like, I don't get you. Like I like them fine. I like them better than filing taxes, but I don't, like them better than revising. But one trait that I think must be really hard is being an extrovert. It's certainly not impossible. I've met a bunch of extroverted writers in my time. But I'm like, how do you, like, what makes you want to sit in front of a computer by yourself for a year? Like,
Totally.
you're an
Yes.
extrovert. It must just be like this constant search for stimulation. Like, I don't,
Yeah.
so I don't, I'm obviously that's just I'm an introvert in case that wasn't clear.
Same.
Yeah, I'm like, ooh, me time for a year by myself in a cabin.
Yes.
Sounds great
Yes,
and not at all creepy.
exactly. And I
Oh
have to
man.
tell people I have to do it. Like, sorry, I have
Hmm.
to be alone.
Yeah, just have to.
No,
But yeah.
Veronica, I'm a very similar, I think, in that way. Uh, and you and I are both somewhat gregarious, I think, as we talk, and so people
Yeah.
mistake that for extroversion. But you're making me wish that I wrote books for a living instead of reading books for a living, because that sounds great. Cabin in the woods for a year,
Yeah.
sign me up.
I
Right.
don't
That sounds
know. Have you
amazing.
ever had an idea?
I know. There's still time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one day. When I get younger, I'll start
Okay.
writing.
Yeah.
It's yeah. So one day. Okay. So we talked a little bit about again. I keep drifting away from the whole day in the life thing. Okay,
That's
it was
fine.
just a
Yeah.
construct to start the conversation, but I do want to riff on what we talked about earlier about Veronica, you say, if I'm not feeling it at the moment, I'll go for a walk, or something like that. That's kind of a micro version of, I'm not feeling it, the ideas aren't flowing, the ink or the pixels these days aren't quite flowing the way that I want them to, so I'm just going to take a break. But that's a micro version. What What about the macro version, what we call writer's block? Do you think this is real, and how do you deal with it? If it is something that, can last weeks or months or even years, and that something just isn't quite working right in your mind as you are trying to write. I'll throw this to you first, Amy. Is writer's block real, and how do you deal with it, if it is?
I mean, as far as is it real, that's like could really be a philosophical question of like,
Mm.
what is writer's block and what does it mean to
That's
you?
Amy. This is what I'm trying to pull out of you.
Yes.
Okay, roll with it. Go
For
go
me
philosophical on
personally,
me.
yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the internal battles within, like that's what it's all about anyway. And
Yeah.
for me personally, anytime I've experienced any major block, it was most often turned out because for me personally, the story wasn't working how I wanted. And that it could be at any point in the process. And honestly, while it has happened to me, I am very stubborn about like, I hate that feeling. I hate not loving what I'm working on. It bothers me and it's indicative of a bigger issue in the story. So I will often just look over what I have so far. Something that really helps is remembering like that first spark that hit you that made you say like, yes, like I want to write this book. I want to spend all the time and effort on it. I'm ready. And a lot of times I will find that just through totally like the nature of creative evolution, you sometimes accidentally get away from that spark and it's become something else, or your feelings have become something else. And it's really nice to go back and remember that original jolt. And that will help me a lot, either figure out what needs to be different. I mean, it's gone as far as I mean, it could happen when you're one chapter in and, oh, I'm going to rewrite this chapter. I'm even just going to add something. I've even gotten to the point where it's as far as the book has been drafted, edited, put out on submission to publishers. I get a few rejections that are very similar, and I know in my bones that it's right. And I have asked my agent to pull things from sub before, and
Mm.
that sucks. I mean, that's super emotional and terrible, but I would say embracing the chance that you'll need to rewrite small to large pieces of text can also help me get through that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Yeah, Veronica, what about you?
Well, first of all, I feel like Amy is one of the most resilient writers that I know. You've
Aw.
gone through some stuff, like
haven't we all?
yeah, but like I don't know. Anyway, I just admire it.
Thank you.
But as far as writer's block, like yeah, I think it's I this thing about whether it's real or not real, like it just seems like sometimes people use that as an opportunity to be mean to other writers where they're like, you're making it up. Just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's like, no! Literally impossible. That's what that phrase means.
I agree.
So yes, I think it's real. I don't encounter it as much as I used to in my career, and I think for me, a lot of it was trying to force myself to work on something that wasn't working. And that doesn't mean like giving up on it, but it's a little bit like, why isn't it working? Like a diagnosis problem. And for me, usually it means that like whatever decision I just made, or big decision in the text, like I can usually trace the writer's block back to like a particular decision that I made. And I'm like, you got to cut everything back until you remember it working and start from there. And like you said, Amy, sometimes that means like 150 pages or like the whole thing is wrong,
when you're lucky it's just like a few pages, but
like and over time I think I've gotten better at recognizing when it's happening, so I don't have to cut as much as I used to, which is nice. And I also think when you're in a point in your career when you're not being steered as much, because you've had some early successes perhaps. Speaking, I don't know anyone who knows about that.
What do you mean?
Yeah. Post-Divergent, I feel like people didn't want to tell me what to do, so they would just be like, whatever you want, which is terrifying and also very nice, and a privilege. So I think I've gotten less inclined to being blocked because I am like, oh, everything I'm working on is something that I really want to be working on at this point, which is a huge luxury, I have to say. But yeah.
Yeah, are you saying that it's easier when like you know that it's going to at least get looked at thoroughly and fairly because of your early success, and
Yeah,
so
I
it's
think
easier to
so.
kind of like you're not as scared that like, hey, nobody's even going to look at this, nobody's going to care, or I don't
Yeah.
know
So I've
if that's what
definitely
you're saying.
Yes, so I've sent things in, and I have decided, or me and my agent or my editor have decided, like, this isn't right. So it's not that everything I write gets like a, like sent out into the world. That's not true at all. But it's at least like, okay, I don't have to do that initial struggling, which can be really like soul crushing to people who
Mm,
are just starting out. And I just think, it's important to acknowledge the effects that those practical concerns have on creativity, because it's not just like, you have to feel like what you're doing is worthwhile, and it's not like a waste of your energy or your time. Like that belief in yourself like should be internal primarily, but it can be influenced by external factors. So I just think it's
oh yeah, it'd
important
be
to know.
foolish to pretend it
Yeah.
wasn't, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. uh,
Yes.
Amy, I want to go back to something you said, if you don't mind. You mentioned remembering the spark, recalling what it was that made you want to write, whether it's the project or the scene or whatever, and remembering what that is and how that um, can help spur you on. How do you do that? Do you remember? Is this all internal and just mental? Do you journal at all? Do you write for yourself so that you can remember, hey, I had this idea today, and you can go back to that page in your journal and say, this is what I was thinking on that day? How do you, uh, yeah, how do you do that internal work of what you're talking about?
Yeah, so I feel like I have a pretty good like memory, emotional memory. Uh, I feel deeply and often, and so I can pretty easily remember things that make me feel, especially anything, X, Y, or
Hmm.
Z, happy, sad, angry, whatever. So I do get like, I feel like the moment when you realize you've come up with an idea for something that would be so fun to work on and something you would love to read yourself, and you just know like this works, like you get like a dopamine rush, or at least I do. So it's easy for me to go back on that. But I do work by hand in notebooks, especially for outlining and brainstorming. When I'm in any brainstorming phase, I love just freeballing it on paper. And I do also use that as a sort of journal. If I go back to I have all my notebooks. I hoard them like a dragon, but it's so cool because I do leave notes and I date everything when I leave a note, or I'll even note this got rejected today. It's just fun to go back and look at the most preliminary notes I ever had on a project, and it makes me feel fondly about it, and it brings back the warm and fuzzies. And it's cool to go back and see myself anguish over, for example, Daughters Unto Devils. That was my debut novel, and I wrote the first version. It didn't get picked up. Got a revise and request uh, from a major publisher that would have given my soul to work with, and rewrote the whole thing, and it was crap. It did not sell.
What
And
you're trying to
so
say is you tried to give up your soul to work with them.
yes, and that is exactly why it didn't work out. I just
Mm.
blindly accepted all the notes, and they were terrible. I knew they were terrible when I decided to do them. And look how I was like so mad at myself, but like it was such a good lesson. I'll never forget the things I learned, but it didn't sell until a second revise and resubmit. I was so long past that, and it, going in again to try again with that story, my agent and I were so in love with it and we knew it could work. I did have to go back and just remember like the OG feelings of just happiness, like Little House on the Prairie meets The Exorcist, and I pretty much planned it all out around one really horrible scene involving ants.
Ah,
But
sorry.
Oh no.
I know it's pretty gnarly.
I love
Anyway,
it.
but yeah, so as far as going back and finding that initial spark, it could be as easy as just accessing my emotional memory, or going back in my notes and seeing how much I wanted it to work and how it looked when I believed with all my heart it was the perfect idea.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
I
Well, oh, sorry.
oh
Go on, Veronica.
I also do this, like trying to reconnect to the thing you loved about the idea, especially when I've spent some time away, which happens occasionally because I'll like be in the middle of something and then have to go promote the last thing, and then you kind of,
Mm.
you know, are like, I can't do these two things at once. But I do it via playlist, so I don't I don't have like a sophisticated or good music taste. So let's just get that out there to start with. But I have realized that like what I do, like I have this process, which I didn't realize it until this past book. So what, 10 books in? So I don't know, it just came out of nowhere. But I start to build a playlist when I get an idea. Like right now I have one on my Spotify called Post-Apocalyptic Road Trip. Like I'm not sure what that book is about
Hell
yet,
yeah.
but it has a playlist.
Sign
And
me up.
Mm.
yes, and then I go for walks and I put on the playlist and I just like let myself visualize a lot. And that's what gives me ideas for scenes. And then I make a list of scenes and then I like string them together. And that is how I outline.
Ooh, I love
And
that.
yeah, and so I have really strong, like I can listen to a song and remember like what scenes usually it's more than one, like what scenes I was thinking of when I was listening to that song. Uh, and, you know, pretty much like, does it have like the vibe, or was it something about the lyrics, or like what is it about that piece of music? Which is interesting, not being like I'm not like a musician, like I don't know. I don't know why it happens that way, but now when I listen to the playlist, it'll help me like reconnect with what was so exciting about that piece of that idea.
Well,
Sure.
if it makes you feel any better, Tolkien did the same thing, by the way. So
Wow.
music was he always he said I regret that I have no musical talent, but he used music a lot to generate his.
I'm sure his was
Oh my god,
fancy.
I love that.
I'm sure.
Did
Yeah,
he have
exactly.
5 Taylor Swift songs on his
I was just
playlist?
gonna mention Taylor Swift.
I'm sure he
Nice.
would have,
Nice.
Veronica. Yes,
Mm,
absolutely.
man of the people.
All right, let me ask you a last question. And we've kind of gotten around the edges of this one, but what is on a daily basis? What is more important to you as far as writing goes and producing, being creative? What's more important? Is it habit or spontaneity?
Whoa.
A mix of both. I mean, habit wise, you need to be able to push yourself to continue even when it feels like a slog or feels like work. But a lot of elements of spontaneity are very powerful in my process for sure. Like, pretty much go by the emotion of it, but mixing those two together, I think balance is a good one.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like habit creates a safe space for spontaneity, something like that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I have like an outline for each work, but I don't do like a scene, like a really detailed like scene by scene outline. I know that works for some people, and almost like the structure helps them to like get over the fear that they're going to get stuck. For me, that doesn't work at all. I have to like, I have to know like the shape of the story. And I have to know where it's going. Otherwise, I like have listless characters who have no goals. But I I also need to be able to have a little like freedom to just let them, like the characters, say things or do things that surprise me. So in the work itself, spontaneity is huge. It's when you happen upon those like inner workings of your brain. Like writing is a conscious process, but it's also an unconscious process. Like the things that appear in your work surprise you sometimes, or if you reread, you're like, I wrote that sentence. That sentence is good. I wrote that. So I love those moments, and I often find that they're the best, like the best moments. But I have to have structure, otherwise I'm just like free balling it through the draft.
I was wondering who was going to be the next person. And yes, congratulations, Amy. You have now minted a new phrase on the Legendarium.
Oh,
Yes.
good. I'm so
I'm
honored.
using this. Yeah, it's you're never mind.
Into
I'm
it.
leaving all the jokes behind. We're
Yeah.
moving forward from free balling. Okay. Dang it! Now there are more. Okay.
Oh,
So
Lord.
I appreciate you both answering these questions, do you have any final thoughts as far as a day in the life, or what somebody might expect from being a writer before we move on to talking about your current projects? Anything else that you kind of want to get out there?
I do want to encourage people to untangle the kind of idea that like if it feels good, it's good, or if it feels bad, it must be bad. Like those things are not connected. Like
As far as
it
like
feels.
what you're writing?
Yeah, so like I frequently have days where I'm like, this is terrible. Like really, I feel that way. And then months later I'll look back and be like, actually it was fine. It was fine that day. It was the same as every other day. Like your talent and your hard work and the skills you've developed, they carry you through bad feelings. And like that's kind of separate from getting really stuck because you've made a bad decision or something like that. I find that people feel like they're like looking into a crystal ball when they look into their emotions, like as far as the quality of the draft. And for me, I've just noticed that that's not true. Like I have a lot of moods, but my writing skill is still there when I'm in those moods. So
Yeah.
it's okay if it feels like scrubbing a toilet sometimes. It's all right.
Dude, yes.
Mhm.
Here, here.
All right. Well, thank you both for your thoughts on the subject. And, like you say, Veronica, or as you're implying, I think if you want to write something, go out and give it a shot. Just give
Oh,
it a
Do
shot.
it.
absolutely.
It's almost certainly not as bad as you think.
It's true.
Straight up.
I have to
Or
say,
it is much worse than you think, and you've got a different problem.
I have
You
to
will
say
soon
that
find out.
because I was talking on a live stream that I did on the channel a little while ago. Like and subscribe, everybody. I was talking on a live stream about a book that I was sent by an author that we knew through the show, and it was so bad that I will never ever reveal who it was.
Craig's like, it was you. Veronica, it was you.
I'm not going to reveal who it was, but she's in here right
I
now.
can promise it was neither of you.
Oh, okay.
No, I will anyway. But so I always say almost certainly because it has happened to me that things are worse.
I
Than
feel
I
like
thought
Let that
possible,
serve as
but
encouragement. Like, if
Yeah.
that can get published and,
so can you.
that's you know what, you're not wrong. You are not wrong.
Totally.
It's true. It's
Absolutely.
not a meritocracy. I mean, that's the should be clear to people, but somehow isn't. You know?
Well, okay, I'm moving on from that, and I'm
Great.
going to ask you about your current project because I could again. I don't want to reveal too much, so I'm just moving on from that. Let's talk about your current projects. Amy Lukavics, you have something called Cold Water Veins, and that is an Audible original. What is an Audible original, and what is this thing? What is this story that you're putting out there?
An Audible original is something that, as of now, you can only listen to on Audible. This story, Cold Water Veins, came from it's a novella, and it originally came from my first adult horror novel that was full length at one point in time, but it just wasn't quite working. Um, Forgot about it for quite a long time, had the opportunity to send pitches into Audible and just on a whim included that one, just a description of it. My lovely editor, Laura, loved it and she wanted me to write it. And honestly, it was one of the most memorable writing experiences only because I was physically ill almost every day while writing it because I was in my first trimester of pregnancy. So when I think back to writing that, I feel like I remember the nausea, but it's it lended well to the story. But it's essentially about um, excuse me, two sisters who discover that the mother that they thought was dead since they were a child was alive all that time, but now she's died for real in their original home village, which is located in a sort of it's a place that's encircled by mountains, and they go back to sort of take a look at their old family farm and reconnect with some people that they knew when they were young. And turns out there's something really horrible going on there, and they're pretty directly connected. And it quickly turns into a story about, what a sister is willing to go through for another and the things we do for love and what is home and all sorts of that stuff with horror thrown in, of course.
Any ants involved? Should we?
No ants, but there are some pretty creepy crawlies, so check it
Awesome.
out.
So horror fans should check it out. It's called Cold Water Veins, and I'm gonna link to that in the show notes so people can go check that out. Your website is amylukavics.com.
It is, yes.
Okay, amylukavics.com. And again, if you don't want to figure out how to spell that, I'll put the link in the description so you can go check that out. Cold Water Veins. Veronica, what do you have going on these days?
Ta-da! For the YouTube people, I just held up a thing. Yeah, okay. It's also a novella, actually, called Arch Conspirator, which is a far future retelling of the Greek tragedy Antigone. And if you haven't studied Antigone in a while,
I had some severe high school flashbacks.
Mm-hmm. I also read it in high school. Yes. No, I loved Antigone in high school. I guess that makes me a dweeb. But anyway.
We knew that.
Yeah.
That's not news.
It isn't. It shouldn't be news to anyone. But Arch Conspirator is set in like the distant future, like after we've had many apocalypses probably. And it's the last civilization on Earth. And Antigone is living in a kind of desperate state where they're trying to save humanity, but the environment is so toxic that it's deteriorating everybody's genetic material, which is probably science, not really science.
Go with
but
it.
They've reacted to this by like kind of having compulsory reproduction in their society and also gene editing. And she is unedited. So she's like Gattaca style.
Nice.
Like pure. But in that society, that means she's like cursed from the start. They think she has no soul. Her and her siblings. So, and her brother dies. This is not a spoiler because that's in the original Greek play, my friends. Her brother dies, and the king, her uncle, forbids anyone from burying him properly or from extracting his material. Sorry, burying him properly in the play, but in Arch Conspirator, it's like extracting his material so he can like continue to live through his genetics or whatever. So that's like a religious practice for them. And she decides to do it anyway, but she gets caught. And yeah, it's a Greek tragedy, folks.
So, yeah, it kind of sounds like Greek tragedy meets like Handmaid's Tale and compulsory.
Yes, some vibes there. Yeah, and this was kind of my attempt to resolve the incest question of the original play because Antigone is Oedipus's daughter. So famously, Oedipus, killed his father and married his mother by mistake. So the play has a lot wrapped up in her psychology, especially around being cursed from birth. And so I was trying to figure out how to translate that, but carrying over some of that like kind of mysticism around parentage. So that is hence the gene editing stuff. But yeah.
There you go. All right. So it's called Arch Conspirator. And is it out already?
It's out, but only just. Yeah. Just a couple weeks ago.
So yeah, by the time people will hear this, it's been out for a little while, for a few weeks. So go check it out, pick it up. And Veronica and Amy, thank you both so much for taking a few minutes and talking about, your approach to writing. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was fun.
Hey, Veronica, it looked like you had one more joke that you wanted to
I was trying to make a joke about I'm really excited. I was really excited to come on again. But I couldn't figure out the right way to do it.
I'm gonna live with the shame of having fake called you out on that forever, probably. So
no, it's okay.
The listeners on Discord will never let me live that down. And if you don't want to let me live that down, you too can join Discord. Just go to thelegendarium.com and there's a link to our Discord server there. It is a lovely place with thousands now of I might be multiple thousands of readers like you who engage in fun and friendly conversation. That doesn't mean we always agree, but it is the most welcoming place on the internet as far as I can tell. So you can find that at thelegendarium.com. You can also find the link to our Patreon page where you can throw $1 in the tip jar if you like what we do here, and we appreciate those who do so. All right, and make sure you check the show notes for the links to what we've talked about today. Veronica and Amy, once again, thank you so much, and thank you to everybody for listening. I will see you all next time.